Hi, so today I'm here with Jenny. Jenny works in M&A Advisory and she previously studied physics at university. So I'm going to be having a chat with her basically a bit about her background and I guess, her story, what led her to choose to study physics and a bit about what her path has been like. Yeah, so welcome, Jenny.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
great if it'd be great if you could give me a bit of an idea, overview about your career path, and then we can maybe have a bit of a discussion about um, what it was like at the early stages.
yeah, definitely. So I grew up and did most of my primary and secondary education in a country called Albania. When I was 15, I got a scholarship to a grammar school here in the UK, where I did my A levels. I studied maths, further maths, German, and physics. I initially came with the idea that I wanted to be an architect, and I did art in my AS level, but that quickly fell apart after I realized it's not what I wanted to do, and my real passion was physics. So that's what I did. I went to study physics at the University of Strathclyde, which at the time that I was there was one of the top physics universities in the UK. It's really good for research, which is what I wanted to do at the time. I wanted to be a researcher. I went for the integrated master's degree, which in the UK, well, in England, that's 4 years. In Scotland, that's 5 years, but they were nice enough to let me skip the first year. There was a big portion of experimental physics in my course, which is what I wanted. And at the end of my second year, I got a scholarship at the National Physical Laboratory, which kind of made me a legend in my uni. But unfortunately, I came out of that internship kind of learning that that's not what I want to do, which is really sad to understand that early in your degree. But I was very determined that I wanted to finish my course. So I went back in third year. I decided to do an Erasmus exchange in Germany, and we can double click into that. It's one of the most fun and best things that I've done in my life. I fought really hard for it because I had to set up the connection between the universities as well.
Right.
I had a passion at the time for material physics, so I picked the University of Münster in Germany, which was doing very interesting research with carbon and materials. And I wrote my bachelor thesis on germanium, which at the time was kind of a very groundbreaking study, and they were just letting this bachelor student do it, which was great.
Yeah.
I went back to finish my master's, got a first. I used to joke to my family that the CIA can hire me now. I'm unbreakable. I can live on no food, no sleep after getting that first. Um, but yeah, I was offered a position with the university, but I decided to try industry. I didn't know what I wanted to do as someone who had her dreams kind of gone wrong. Not wrong, wrong. That's the wrong words. Like I kind of wanted to explore a bit more what life had to offer. So I landed this graduate scheme with Vodafone, which was great for someone like me because it meant that I could try 4 different careers within 2 years and see which one I liked best. I had 3 placements at Vodafone. I worked in business development. I worked in innovation, and then I also worked in operations. And out of that, I realized that I really liked working in technology and innovation. We were building proof of concept solutions, and I was slowly starting to enter more of an engineering path, but also had a lot of contact with very high-level executives like the C-suite, because we were the team that was actually producing new solutions for enterprise customers at Vodafone, which gave me exposure to like the CFO, the CEO really early on in my career and helped me develop those stakeholder management skills, which translated really nicely onto my next career, which was the M&A Tech Advisory. I have to say that I was recruited for this. for a firm called PwC, which many people might know. I started there as a
A
senior
firm
consultant,
called what? Sorry.
just PwC, which is very well known, but I didn't know it when I was a physics student. So it might not be that popular within the STEM circles. Um, from then, I moved to a smaller boutique consulting firm called BearingPoint, where I stayed 2 years. And now I am about 3 months into my new role as a senior manager at Deloitte, again doing merger and acquisition advisory, specifically in the tech sector. And I can tell you a bit more about what that entails um, a bit later.
Right. Cool. Um, yeah. So I guess when you were kind of finishing your A levels and you were kind of deciding what subject you wanted to do at university, what was some of the kind of thought process you went through that led you to decide actually you wanted to do a physics degree?
That is a very good question. I can answer in two parts, what I was thinking at the time and what I've realized about myself looking back. Uh, life is understood backwards, as they say. So what I was thinking at the time was very much, I had very much scientist approach to this, which is what am I good at and what is the overlap of that to what do I actually want to do and what do I want my life to look like. What I was good at, I knew that I was very strong in maths. I was very good at physics, and these were things that not only I studied for them, but they also kind of came naturally to me. So I liked understanding difficult concepts or even making sense of the world, of the physical world through physics and maths. And there's an expression we used to use a lot in my school, which was physics is the poetry of nature. And that has stayed with me since then. And then there was the other circle of the Venn diagram, which was what do I see my future being like? And I tried to speak to people who had had that future. And luckily at my school, we had a lot of alumni who had gone down this path and they would come back and visit. And I would meet with them. They were describing doing scientific research, working in labs and academia. And at the time, that was just the most exciting thing for me. So I was really lucky that like I could meet those people and hear about firsthand about their experiences. And then that overlapped with something that I was good at. So it was very clear in my mind that physics was the way for me. And I can tell you it's been 8, 9 years now that I've finished my degree. I do not regret it. I know a lot of people in my age who would go back and say, oh, I wish I had done something different. I'm not one of them. Actually, I'm so glad I went with physics. And the thing about physics is that you can pretty much go into anything with a physics degree. It's extremely universal as long as you know how to position yourself properly for it. Because when I was in uni, I also worked for the graduate exit program where I got on behalf of the university to interview a lot of graduates where they had gone after completing their degrees. And physics was just one of those degrees that there was no clear sort of pattern. So you to someone who studied, chemistry and biology would go into medicine, or physics was just all over the place. But I will say that a lot of physicists end up going in finance, which is something very that people would not guess. But yeah, a lot of physicists end up working in finance, well, myself included.
Yeah.
It's not as an uncommon path as you would think.
Yeah. There's a funny video at the Imperial Department of Chemical Engineering. The students got together and made a video, and it was kind of it was a skit. It was basically what they wanted to do in first year, and then they interviewed them again at the final year what they're actually going into, and they all said banking. Yeah, it's quite funny, but yeah, yeah.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So during your time at university, as you mentioned, you did a number of things, which you can say outside of the cookie cutter, you could say, like you did spend some time in research, getting insight into that. You also, as you mentioned, you kind of arranged kind of a Erasmus. You spent some time at a different university. So I guess on the research internship side, what was that experience like? And also within the context of the fact that at that stage, of course, you were still doing your undergraduate degree and then you're doing this research placement. So what was that? What was that like for you? And I guess also when it came to your, your final year, I guess you did, final year thesis. Do you feel that having got that past research experience, um, would you say that potentially helped when you were actually doing your thesis in the end, as far as the skills you were able to develop and stuff like that?
Um, I'm not quite sure I understand what the question is.
So
So,
the question's really focused on the research placement you did.
mhm.
Yeah.
So my research placement with the National Physical Laboratory was very much a kind of more computational business development placement. We were exposed to the people doing actual scientific research, but we were entering with the what was then called at NPL the BAU department. I don't know if they still call it that now. And our brief was to write this Python script to try and determine where they should invest in the next 5 years. And the reason for that is that apparently scientific research investment follows a kind of cyclical approach, and there are certain topics that get a lot of funding for 5 years, and then as they get less popular, others get more popular, etc., which is quite common in a lot of things. And I was part of a team of 3 interns who were meant to write a natural language processor program to try to extract keywords from abstracts of papers that had been funded in the last 50 years and then try to extrapolate what would be very popular to fund in the future, which now in the age of AI sounds like a very simple task, but I think this was back in 2015 when AI was not in anyone's mind
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
imagination, or very few people's. This was quite a difficult task to do, but I think what kind of broke my spirit was not as much the science and the research, which was amazing. And during my 3 months there, I got to experience a lot of things for the first time, in the sense that I was one of the first humans to witness that phenomena. But what really broke my spirit was how much bureaucracy there was behind the funding, behind getting your research published, behind quotas, the politics that exist in the world of academia. And that is ultimately what made me realize that this is maybe not the right thing for me.
Right. Right. Fair. Yeah. I've heard a number of things about politics in academia. Yeah. 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 That sounds. I mean, yeah. So as you said, at the time, it wasn't really the case that, especially like the accessible large language models and stuff was not really so accessible at that time. Even I think
No.
even a number of years after that, things like, for example, even like sentiment analysis was still quite, as far as application in like serious projects in the industry related projects, was quite new, seeming as quite cutting edge. So I don't know if like what was some of the, I don't know how much detail you want to go into, but what were some of the challenges like in that project?
It's been a really long time. I think that the main thing was we were working with Python, if I remember correctly. We were using the natural language processing package. There was very few um, sort of there was very little out there on Substack. I remember staying up nights at a time. Of the three of us, there was two other students. They were both from University College at London. And the three of us spent a lot of time kind of scraping Substack to see what we could find, what pieces of reusable code we could use. And once we came up with a method and we had a piece of working code, we had to find out the data that we were going to put into the program, which working at NPL meant that we had access to basically unlimited scientific studies. And then came the question, okay, well, which ones do we use? Because the first results that we got were really bad. So imagine basically what we were trying to build, if I could compare it to today's terms, it's like a very basic AI agent that cannot determine, so it cannot determine the link between different words, and you say, okay, look at these 5,000 published pieces of research, and then you tell me which words occur the most, and then what's the connection between the words and how often they occur together as a sentence or in a row, and try to determine trends. But it's very easy nowadays to just go to ChatGPT or Claude and just say that and it'll come back with something great. But back at the time, you literally had to write a piece of code for every simple thing that you wanted it to do, such as determine the factor that such and such words occur next to each other. And then lo and behold, the first results that we got was, oh, the most used word is the, as in the thing. And, you know, we had to keep working iteratively to basically deconstruct human speech to remove all those filler words. And in the end, we didn't get to, I think we laid really good foundations for what the program was going to be. There was a lot of reiterative tries. A lot of it was just us bumping into yet another issue and solving for that issue, but 3 months was not enough to kind of come up with this agent at the time with the technology that we had available. But we did make really good progress towards it. I think the batch of interns after us made it to a first sort of stable version.
Right. Also, for those who are not so familiar, could you give maybe a bit of an insight as far as what kinds of science tends to be done at MPL? What type of scientists tend to work there as well?
So NPL is actually one of the most prestigious places you could be doing scientific research in the UK. The type of science that is done there, right now, I'm probably not so sure because that changes every, with as the science progresses. As the science progresses, obviously the attention of physicists and labs will shift towards topics that are more relevant to the times. It is a government institution, as far as I'm aware, so it will shift its focus appropriately. But I can tell you about the time that I was there, I was very interested in materials research. So there was a lot of research on carbon, coming up with new materials. There was a lot of research on semiconductors that will always be and has always been a very popular topic of research. So we're always trying to come up with new materials to make chips, to harvest more desirable features of materials. For example, we use silicon chips now because they, at a certain temperature, they can reach a superconductive state, and that is kind of the basis of all of our electronics. But can we use something else instead? Um, there was a lot of research on magnetism. One of the cool experiments they had at NPL was something to do with magnets. I don't remember now, but the type of physicists that were working on this project, they were a team from MIT who were doing research with NPL. A lot of these organizations have contracts and collaborations with many sort of world-leading research bodies and universities like Harvard, like MIT in the States, or universities in China or Singapore. I do remember meeting many different physicists from those countries, which is, great exposure to someone who's just getting started on a physics career. And something that has always been the case at the National Physical Laboratory, because they are the keepers of the standards of measurement in the UK and the keepers of time. They have the atomic clock, and they're always trying to make improvements to the way that we measure time. The atomic clock is the most accurate measure that we have for time now, and there's a really cool museum on site on how our understanding of measuring time has evolved since the beginning of time, from the sun dial up to the atomic clocks. So yeah, that's always the sort of background thing that's always going on at NPL.
Cool. And also, during your studies, you kind of, as you said, you kind of proactively arranged to spend some time at a different university abroad and study there. What was one of the drivers that led you to decide, actually, you wanted to spend a year at a different university and get that kind of experience? And then, of course, once you got there, what was that experience like generally?
So there's two things. One is my academic interest in the University of Munster specifically, because I knew there was a group that was doing research on materials and semiconductors, which was a group that I wanted to join, and ultimately I did for my bachelor thesis. And then second is just the formative experience of being a student in a different country and having that experience. Obviously, I said I did German in my A-levels, so I wanted somewhere where I could practice my German. I
Yeah.
went through a traumatic event of taking nuclear physics in German, which I will not do again in my life.
Wow.
At the time, it was an experience to go through. Um, so yeah, those are the main two drivers, and obviously I'm someone who is very curious about life, and I guess that's one of the fundamental things or traits that you have as a physicist. You're curious about life, and I remember we had an amazing professor who I think at the time was the dean of no, he was not the dean of the faculty of physics. He was something else, but his name is like Nigel Langford. This is a guy that I will always remember, and he did our intro lecture, first ever lecture when we sat in university in physics, and he said, once you leave this university and have studied physics, you will not only have a degree, but your entire way of seeing and perceiving the world will have changed, and you will be forever different. And I didn't quite get what he meant at the time, but when I graduated, I did go to his office to take a picture with him and say, you were so right, and your words will always stay in my mind. Because as a physicist, I don't know what you studied, David, but as a physicist, you do tend to see the world very differently. You always want to ask why are things a certain way,
Yep.
and you want to figure out what is the mechanism, what is the theory, what is the neatest and simplest form of explanation that I can fit into this phenomenon. That's not just, oh, I see the light and it breaks up into photons and sometimes it behaves like a wave. It's also, why does my friend behave like that? Or why is life like this? Or why does politics work in a certain way? And what are the forces that make the world the way that it is. Um, so yeah, having those questions, I think I just wanted to experience university life in a different country. I already knew German. I had a very healthy group of friends in Germany already who would be ready to receive me. And I remember again walking into Nigel Langford's office and saying, I really want to go to Germany. Can we please make it happen? I want to join this research group because I want to do research on semiconductors. Will you please help me make this happen? And Nigel, who I'm sure is a kid trapped in an adult body, said, absolutely yes. This is who you need to contact. This is what we need to do. And we'll get you there because you're so passionate about this. And yeah, we made it happen. My year in Germany taught me many things. Um, the great things were building having that Erasmus experience, which was fantastic, meeting people from all over the world. I became so integrated with it when I came back in the UK. I actually became the UK's national treasurer of the ESN student network. So I stayed with the organization for a long time, even after I graduated.
So ESN is Erasmus Student Network, is it?
Student network,
Right.
yes,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
correct. So I just need to get my charger. So I stayed with them even after I returned from my Erasmus. The other thing was I did actually get to do my bachelor thesis with the group um, that I had initially wanted. And I followed a very similar strategy. I found out where the professor's office was on campus, made an appointment. I walked right in and I said, these are my credentials. This is what I'm interested in. Can I please have a spot in your group? And the answer was yes. So that happened. Um, the research itself, again, was um, first time that it was being done as a piece of research, which is sometimes unusual for you to do as a student. Sometimes you would be doing repeat experiments of something that has been done before. What was really exciting in my case was that I was part of this group that was doing this research for the first time, and we were looking into different annealing temperatures of amorphous germanium, which is a type of semiconductor material that is currently too unstable to use for electronics. But if
So
we
so
could
just
make
to
it work,
clarify, this
yep.
was your final year thesis, was it?
This was my bachelor thesis. So, but I
Oh,
had an integrated degree, so it's an integrated master's.
yep.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did
Yeah,
the
good,
integrated masters. But wait, so
good.
I mean, in the integrated masters, you're doing the final thesis, but effectively a master's thesis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I did it back in Glasgow because you cannot do your final year on Erasmus. It has to be back in your
Oh,
home
okay. So you
university.
did two.
I did two theses, yes. One at bachelor level and one at master level.
Okay, yeah. So from what I've understood so far, you took quite a number of steps to be quite proactive, and it paid off in many ways during your studies. Um, yeah, which is it's quite good. Um,
I mean, if I love my time as a student, all my friends will tell you, everyone I meet will tell you that if anyone got her money's worth out of her education, that is Xheni Pandazi. It's really a time in your life to be extremely curious and experiment as much as possible. That's with yourself, your identity, your career, your degree. I was friends with so many lawyers. I even got to go to their law thingies sessions they used to do. I was friends with so many engineering students. At Strathclyde, we had this, I believe they called it Rocket Science Club, where they genuinely, because the Strathclyde has connections to the technology and engineering, it's called the TEG. I don't remember what it stands for now, but basically you could be part of a club that is sending real satellites into space, because Strathclyde has a very strong connection with many sort of private companies that specialize in sending satellites into space. And as a physics student, that is obviously amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
It is very mind blowing for someone who is 21 studying physics and can be part of sending a satellite into space. So yes, it really pays off to be involved with as many clubs as possible, even if they seem completely irrelevant. Sometimes they'll say no, and that's okay. You just move on to the next thing and experiment with the next thing that comes along. So yeah, I got really lucky that all my professors said yes. Obviously, I did the work as well. You know, I was a good student. I frequently maintained a first. I was every year on Dean's list. In my second year, I actually won an award as I was top of my class. So that does make it very easy for many doors to open to you and many opportunities to be available to you. But it's not necessarily a prerequisite. Sometimes the only thing you need to do is just ask nicely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So on the topic of yeah. So I studied chemistry. Yeah. So
Oh, there you
that
go.
was
You
my
did a
degree.
science as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I did a degree in chemistry. And yeah, it did. I did experience that when I was doing it, I became a lot more curious of an individual. Yeah, yeah. Um,
I
and
did actually hang out with a lot of friends from Imperial, um, through my connections at the Erasmus student network. We had a big presence at Imperial University, so I ended up on many of your union nights.
yeah, I do remember
Um,
coming across the Erasmus when I think it was must have been during the was it Freshers Fair or something like that? Yeah, probably during the
mhm.
Freshers Fair. Yeah, they're seem quite a serious society. Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, cool. So I guess on the academic side, um, it's quite interesting to hear that you're quite you're a top performing student basically, in your cohorts. Is there any tips, advice that you would give to students who are progressing to a physics degree or STEM degree generally, as far as on the academic performance side?
Um, I think I can only say what worked for me.
Yeah,
The thing that helped me the most is, again, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I went to Strathclyde, which is a small university. There were 100 of us in the cohort, and you, some of you will like immediately know that that's been extremely privileged. And what that means is because we were such a small group, should we ever felt that we needed some extra attention, you could literally just knock on your professor's door and ask for help, or knock on your tutor's door and ask for help. And I have, I do, I never recall of an instance when I went to a tutor to say, hey, I didn't understand this during class. Can you please sit down with me for 10 more minutes to go through this again? And them saying no. It might have been, please come back in an hour, but it was never no. And that is a huge privilege, I feel, to have that much attention from your lecturers, your tutors, and students above you. I was also very involved with the Physics Society, and every day we would do these drop-in sessions for older students to help younger students, and that helped me tremendously. We also organized group study sessions, where again, if you were too shy to go to a group with, year 4 students, you could still study together with your peers, where we just got together in the physics common room and just studied in silence, or went through our tutorials together. I think that was kind of my secret weapon, just utilizing the access that I had to the knowledge. from the higher ups, but also making use of study groups within my peer group.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, common room. I definitely found the common room helpful because the students in the year above, when they're taking a break from labs, oftentimes they'll go and sit in a common room and brag about their grades. So when I heard about the students that were getting top grades, I'd approach them afterwards and be like, "Oh, could you give me some tips?" So that was definitely very useful. Um, yeah, okay. So, um,
I'm a strong believer in you don't have to figure out everything on your own. It's always best to learn from those who figure things out first.
yeah, yeah. Um, so after you finished your degree, you went into effectively, um, you said it was a rotational program. Part of
My
it
graduate
was,
program, yeah.
yeah, part of it was, you said software engineering, innovation. So yeah, maybe if you could give a bit of an insight as to what that experience was like, um, and yes, I guess partly also how it perhaps shaped um, your career as far as what you decided to do after that.
Ooh, I'm gonna be very honest here. Um, because I do go back very often to the career service back at Strathclyde. And this is something that I wish someone had told me at the time. So going from a very high caliber academic um, environment, like doing research in physics and then being offered a PhD, but you decide, you want to take some years out to industry and then immediately go into a corporate job that's a very sort of structured graduate program. That was a very hard transition for me. So it went from going 100 miles an hour to immediately going in a 20 zone. Things move a lot slower in industry, be that, in tech, in software development, um, in innovation even, and especially operations. So I really struggled to find my identity after leaving university because I had spent 4 amazing years, including a year abroad, of being very successful, being very driven, having a lot of drive to and momentum to push things forward. The pace of academia is really quick. You've got your exams, you've got your semester, that is done. You have to keep going, 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 and you build yourself up to that. And then all of a sudden, you're dropped into an office somewhere in Newbury, and things go much, much slower. You were building a very complex sort of quantum wells mathematical model 3 months ago in one of the most advanced labs in the UK. 3 months later, you're just building a resource model for the people in your department. And I can actually tell you an anecdote from this time. My manager sat me down and he wrote down a plus, a minus, a multiplication sign, and a division sign. And he said, Jenny, you've got a very complicated model here trying to predict what everyone's going to be doing. You see these four? This, and he pointed at the plus and the minus. These are okay. The division and multiplication only when necessary, but any maths more advanced than this is a no-no. You do not go there. And I can see myself as a sort of a very bright-eyed masters of physics, doing, thinking I'm doing budgeting for a Fortune 500 company. I had, my dreams of working in corporate,
Yeah,
and they were all shattered.
yeah. I mean, for I
Um,
can imagine for a physics graduate hearing that. I mean, yeah, yeah,
it was not great, but keeping that at the time, keeping that curiosity, studying the people around you, um, you I wanted to hold off judgment because that environment was appropriate for someone, just not me. So I moved on to a different team, which was the innovation team, and this is where my life changed. So um, I had this manager called Brian, who's the coolest guy in the world. He was really the type of guy who would sketch ideas on the back of the napkin, and the next day they would become reality. I told him I have a strong interest in quantum cryptography. I want to write a white paper on it. He said, absolutely, let me connect you to the quantum computing expert inside Vodafone. You can sit down with him for an interview. You can write your white paper. And that's what I did. I told him I have a lot of interest in virtual reality. And he said, great, what do you need? What do you want to build? And I said, I got really lucky because that was a year of COVID as well. So I said, I want to rebuild our office in virtual reality. So it's great. Let's make that happen. And we did make it happen. And if you scroll back on my LinkedIn, you can see that was like one of the big things I did at Vodafone. Um, and that took most of the time in that placement, which was great. And then came, after your second placement, you had to go through this kind of coaching process with managers to go into your third placement. You were assigned your first two placements randomly, and your third placement, you kind of have to go through interviews with managers. They have to pick you, and you have to pick them. But the whole process caused a lot of sleepless nights for graduates. And I go to Brian and I say, hey, Brian, there is this algorithm called the perfect marriage algorithm. It won the Nobel Prize in 2012. I have an idea to write a program to democratize this process, to make it easier. And instead of waiting a whole week for the results to come out, they would be available immediately, basically. And it would give more power to the graduates when picking their placement. And Brian said, let's do it. He got in contact with HR. He pitched them the idea. He told me what resources you need to build this. I picked a couple of friends of mine, and in 3 months, we kind of, in our spare time, we built this program. We packaged it up nicely, and we delivered it. And the cohort after us, they didn't want to use it on our cohort, but the graduates after us, they got to use it. We called it the magic sorting hat algorithm,
All right.
and I
Like
think they
is that
still
is that
use
is
it.
that is that a Harry Potter
A Harry
reference?
Potter reference,
Right.
yes.
Right.
And they still use it nowadays. I mean, I think it was 2012 when Brian sent me a screenshot. So this algorithm was developed by Xheni Pandazi and Bianca Paul when they were graduates, and I thought that was a cute little touch. And yeah, I was matched with the operations team, and I'm not proud to say it's not so much because of the work, it was because I wanted to move to London. So I wanted to pick a London placement. So far I was working in the offices in Newbury. And, I did want to give the metropolitan life a try. Sometimes the choices we make are a bit more sort of are not always just about our career, also about the life around the career.
Yep.
So I worked in operations, um, which meant I was kind of assistant manager to a manager who oversaw basically all the support teams from Vodafone. So if you are a big customer and you're international, someone like BMW or Ferrari was one of our customers, and you have connectivity all over the world, and if something goes wrong, you would call my manager, who would then pass this on to me. And then I had a team of 250 engineers somewhere in India who would help me solve the issue. This was a job that was not for the weak, for sure, and that burned me out really quickly. It was interesting. I got to travel a lot, but it was not what I wanted to do. So I'm someone who's curious. I'm someone who's innovative. I'm not someone who solves problems. I'm someone who looks forward and makes the way. I'm not the person who solves the issues of other people's work. And again, you just need to find out who your persona is, and what you like to do, and then gravitate towards that.
Right, right. Okay. Um, yeah, so I mean, later on, you did, um, you kind of transitioned, right? For you, so you're doing the Vodafone role, and you transitioned into more of a, I guess, corporate finance related type of role. Um, what was your experience like when you switched? And I guess the two experiences, how was it different? What was the, because I understand, as you said, you kind of experienced quite a bit of a tempo shift moving from academia to industry. What was the experience moving?
So, I mean, I'm still an M&A consultant, so that should tell you that I have found my place. There is a sort of happy ending. I was very lucky. I was recruited into the PwC team, which at the time was called Deal Advisory Team. I believe it has changed now, and it's part of Strategy and. Initially, I was recruited as a networks expert because I had all of my sort of operations and innovation experience from my time at Vodafone. I was recruited as a senior analyst, a senior associate, sorry. But the titles change between the firms, so there's no really way to make sense of them. Um, I spent 2 years there as a senior associate. The For me, the integration was extremely seamless, and we called it Xheni's honeymoon because I was having a fantastic time, especially the 6 first months. Um, I picked up on the job really quickly. The tempo was much better. So if academia was 100 miles an hour, um, the uh, industry was 20, and then consulting is somewhere 70 or 80 zone. So the pace picked up significantly. My colleagues were very different. They stayed late, they worked hard, they built models, they built sophisticated models. So I could go beyond the four basic actions on a calculator. I was actually praised as if I had built this model for calculating something for a client and it could be reused and it could be repackaged. So suddenly my way of thinking, my way of viewing the world, can we fit a theory around this? Can we fit, um can we make this hypothesis work? Suddenly that was back on the table. So hypothesis thinking is very important if you are a consultant. Building models, proving them, disproving them, especially reusable models that you can use in many different cases. Those are all very desirable traits as a consultant. And suddenly everything was back on the table and I was more free to do the things that I was naturally interested in doing, which made the work a lot easier for me. It was a lot more demanding, but it felt more natural to the pace that my brain enjoys going at. And I felt a lot less resistance from my peers because I wasn't sort of mismatched to the environment where I was working in. Now, my peers were also extremely interesting. So these were people who had a bit more of an outdoorsy life, or they were more into traveling, or they had sort of more active lives than the people you meet in industry. And that's where I kind of met a group of friends that I'm still friends with nowadays. Actually, 3 months ago, I attended one of their weddings. And so there were two things, the pace of the work, the type of the work. So we work a lot with private equity. We work a lot with family offices, even corporate sometimes, but mostly with private equity work, which is very unforgiving. So they want the answer and they want it yesterday. And for someone with a brain that's
Sorry
very inquisitive, Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Just for students, like some students might not know what private equity is, so if you could give a very brief, just brief idea. Um,
How do I explain private equity? In a brief idea, well, so these are, what maybe call them offices with special investment vehicles where they invest in businesses. They would like to buy or sell businesses. Typically, they would buy a business. So a very recent transaction. Um, Actually trying to think one that has gone on the news. So I'm
yeah,
not.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, no,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it's, for example, blank coffee. You call blank?
It's
That is
what Blank Street is it?
Blank Street. Yes.
Blank Street Coffee.
I'm so bad with names. Blank Street Coffee that has been bought by private equity, I believe, in the last 2 years. Um, Basically, what they do is that they buy businesses. They typically hold them for a period of typically 5 years. And during this 5 year period, they will transform the business to make it more efficient and extract more value. And then they would sell it. Um, they would exit, so they would sell it after 5 years. Um, that's making a profit. So it's very much like in transactions, we like to use the comparison of buying a house. If that's a fixer-upper, obviously you fix it and then you sell it for a higher price.
Yeah, yeah.
And private equity is, yeah, a type of investment vehicle that does this, but with businesses, and that could range from small businesses to really large businesses. Um, like the whole Port of Athens, for example, or Wembley Stadium. Actually, that's a good one. That was for sale recently. It used to be owned by American private equity firm, and I think it's been sold to JP Morgan now. Um, does does that count as a description?
Yeah, no, that gives a really, really good idea. Yeah, yeah.
So basically, private equity, and you typically work with an associate within the firm. They're always looking for the next business to buy. A private equity firm typically will do 1 to 2 deals a year, so they're not hyperactive. But by the time that they would engage someone like myself who works in transactions, they would already have exclusivity on the deal. So it would be already pretty far ahead in the transaction process. So they would already have a good idea if they want to purchase an asset. So they would hire someone like me to do due diligence on the assets. But yeah, the work is very dynamic. It's very quick. There are very dynamic deadlines. These are people who are very demanding. They're on top of their game, kind of like you see in the movies. So when you have, for example, if you take Suits, so they do a lot of M&A work in the show Suits, and
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of it is quite good. So in any transaction, you have the buyer, well, the seller, the buyer, the lawyers, then you have the consultants, who'd be like myself, and then there's always a bank that's loaning the money. So Suits is describes part of that process in the show. That's the law part of it. We are engaged on the consulting part of it, and it's a similar lifestyle, but not quite. So we're
Right. Yeah.
definitely not charging lawyer fees on a transaction.
Right. Cool. Yeah. That's quite insightful. And later on, you went from the strategy and to BearingPoint. Um, what was the, I guess, difference in the experience across the two firms?
Um, it was an expansion of my horizon. So PwC or Strategy and are very established firms. When you're in there, it's fantastic because you have a lot of opportunities, maybe some international opportunities. They have a really wide network, but it also means that you are one of the many people who work at the firm. So you're competing with a really great number of people. And uh, again, on the humble brag train, I was voted the number one senior associate in my year, the first year that I was there. So I did really enjoy that transition. But I found that I reached a point where I had hit a ceiling, and you kind of have to wait for the people ahead of you to get promoted or to move forward or to get on better projects. So I thought I can speed up that process by trying a different type of firm, which was a boutique firm like BearingPoint, which was very different to Strategy and. Now, BearingPoint, I was employee number 3 or 4, I think. So it was revamping its capital arm, and it was building a new team. And I got to learn so much at BearingPoint because suddenly there was very little guardrails in place for what I could and could not do. If I wanted to stray away from a way of writing a report, if I wanted to follow a different lead, I could do it suddenly. There was very little overhead. There was a lot. We worked with different types of clients who enjoyed that a little bit more. So they didn't want a typical report that they would get from a team, from a service like ours. They actually wanted to drill down into specific things. And I really got to expand my horizon, sort of beyond that cookie cutter report that you would issue uh, maybe in a more established firm. And cookie cutter is not bad. Obviously, there is a place always for standardized reporting, uh, but there is also a part of the market that is interested in more specialized reports. We worked a lot with mid-market technology firms. Um, I think some of the things that have been on the news, like a lot of transactions for a firm called Caleris that does a lot of software for maritime industry, which is something I had no idea before I joined BearingPoint. And then I was on all of these projects on like maritime technology software, which was very interesting. And we got to do a much deeper dive into technology. So my role actually shifted more from it was kind of less corporate finance and more technology expert during my time at BearingPoint, but always in that transaction sort of picture. So that was always the core
Yeah,
of the question.
yeah, and that's, it sounds like quite important work. I mean, the maritime industry is massive. Like,
It's
yeah. So
definitely
yeah,
going
yeah,
through a revamp right now. It's very active.
yeah. Um, okay. So
There is one, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
one more thing I did at BearingPoint. Well, I did many things at BearingPoint. I organized, I was a social person, I did a lot of research on AI. But one thing I did was that I was the person who was the project owner of recruiting. And I did a lot of recruiting for internships. I interviewed a lot of graduates. I interviewed a lot of students, and then also I interviewed a lot of experienced people for very experienced roles. So if you want to dive into that, we can do that too. But if it's not of interest, obviously we can skip.
Yeah, so I guess before we get to that, one of the things, would you, given your experience having gone to kind of, initially you went to a role which you found that actually it was not quite a good fit with your strengths. Some of your strengths were underutilized in the role, and then of course later on you got a bit something that was a bit more, or you could say much more aligned. Uh, is it something you would advise as far as students who are um, about to start university or at university to actually pursue for example, even though their degree might be, I don't know, something, science, I don't know, engineering or biology or something like, would you actually suggest them to try and do internships which are maybe a corporate finance, something which is maybe they're thinking, well, this isn't a quite, this isn't a physics internship, but would you actually advise students to actually have a go at things like this?
Mm, absolutely yes. So again, think of your student years, even your A-level years as kind of a free trial of life. And I actually had a student from Cambridge when I was at BearingPoint who just asked me about if she could shadow me for 2 weeks. It wasn't a kind of formalized training event or whatever, so she didn't need to apply for it. She just literally asked me out of the blue, and I said yes because it doesn't cost anything to me. And obviously, what a great piece of information to have, even before going to university or before going into the work environment, to actually see for yourself what it's like to have a certain career. And that is something I wish I could have done differently actually, because when I was in uni I said, oh, I'm a physicist, I'm only going to go for research roles. I know I want to, I don't know, I want to work at NASA or I want to work at CERN and this is all I want to do. But life will take you many places and your priorities will shift as you grow up. Um, I'm not saying that will happen to everyone, but it will happen to a lot of people. And if you can expose yourself to as many different careers as you can, that even ones that seem completely unrelated to your engineering degree, such as a corporate finance role, I would still I would still say go do it, because I have friends who work in sort of engineering project management roles that wanted to keep using their engineering background. I have friends who studied English literature and now work in corporate finance. And obviously it's myself. You kind of, your priorities shift as you grow up. So you might find that you have a big passion for academia, but it doesn't support the kind of lifestyle that you thought you were going to have at 30 or 40 or 50. Or maybe your main priority is having a family and raising a family, and you want to maximize your resources and you want to move into a more lucrative career. And that is always, maybe it's a bit of a taboo subject to talk about that, but you work to make a living and there's obviously a part that is your passion and this is what you want to do, but that's also going to be your livelihood, your lifeline. That's going to determine the quality of your life. And that's where you have to be very honest with yourself. Like, what is the game that I'm playing? What are the variables? And which ones do I want to maximize for? And which ones can I compromise for? And while you're still a student, after the great day you graduate, it costs you absolutely nothing to walk up to people and try different internships, even if it's an internship in journalism. You might find that you want to be a science writer later on, or even one in fashion. I have friends who are experimenting with new materials for fashion, and we also, I think, a couple of years ago, I think one of the fashion houses, I think Schiaparelli, was doing research with new materials that, solidify into fabric once they touch human skin. So you would be surprised how much STEM is applicable in every different industry, be that, fashion, be that medicine. So many people go into, with engineering degrees, going to like medicine or even physics. There's a field called medical physics, uh, science journalism, science tourism even. So if someone had gone back to me when I was 22 and said, "Do you want an internship in fashion as a physics student?" I would say, "Yeah, hell yeah." One thing I said no to was I didn't have, I'm not going to name it, one of the big sort of weapons manufacturers. They're really big into recruiting STEM students. And obviously, no hate or judgment to all the people who do go to onto those jobs. But I always said no to those internships because that did not align with my values. And as I said, figure the game you're playing, what variables you want to maximize for. My sort of, I would not feel good knowing I work to create weapons. Someone's got to do it, and someone's got to keep us safe. But that person's not me, and that is
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Someone else can go and do that, and that's fine with me.
yeah. Um, yeah, and I've seen, quite a number of STEM students. Even some of them after their PhD will go into things like patent related, like legal work, become like patent attorneys, things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of things that someone with a STEM background can do. Um, and yeah, so I guess um, on the note you mentioned as far as um, kind of from your perspective as someone who's interviewed a lot of students or graduates, um, it can be the case that for some students quite early on in university, some opportunities do require interviews. Sometimes it might be more brief interviews, but that do require interviews to actually get certain opportunities, whether it's some sort of brief work experience or yeah, a lot of different things. So what would be some, from your experience, what would be some pointers for those students in that regard?
Um, I think what makes you really stand out in an interview, I would say, I'll maybe look at it in three dimensions. The first one is you present yourself like someone who is well spoken, is well articulated, and can bring their ideas across. So very clear communication is a must. And to me, that is a skill that you can always learn and hone. And there's some really good books on this. The second is the person who's trying you is trying to solve a specific problem. And this is a bit tricky because there is such a thing as a good job description and a bad job description. A good job description will tell you immediately what the problem that they're trying to solve is, and a bad job description will leave you puzzled. I would generally not interview for someone who's written a bad job description from the get-go, but in the event that you can identify the issue that they're trying to solve, ask yourself, am I the right person for the job? And then spend the interview trying to convince the person that you can solve their problem. And then the third is being a decent human being. So every company, every job will ask themselves, is this someone who fits with the culture of the team? And that's just as important as your technical qualifications. And that doesn't mean that you have to be someone who's traveled the world. It doesn't mean you have to be interesting. You just have to be someone that knows how to work in a team, that knows how to communicate, that I think something my manager always told me, you don't have to be interesting, you have to be interested. So uh, basically show that you're not going to be someone difficult to work with. So if you've got those three things, good presentation, good oral skills, and written communication skills, you know how to solve a specific problem, so that's your technical skills, and you're a decent human being, that will get you very far in interviews.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um,
But
and and then also, I guess the other part of that would be actually after students have gotten the opportunity, right? So, and they're, in a workplace environment. Is there any kind of observations you've made in that regard, or I guess pointers in that regard from your experience?
Well, is in how to make a good impression or
Yeah,
how to fit in.
basically, yeah.
I think it's just an extension of what I already said. So, what is the reason? What is the reason for your team to exist? So, what's the thing that you do? So, if you're a research group, then your reason to be is to do research on this particular thing. You want to figure out why a magnet behaves in a certain way when exposed to such and such forces. And I guess you should be able to, understand what's going on, and if not, to ask those who do know to explain it to you. Definitely, that's always such a good quality for any person who joins the team. Uh, Ask questions. If you will be overwhelmed and you will be scared and you will be nervous. And the best way to get rid of all of those feelings is to just ask your buddy or ask your manager or ask someone that you feel a bit safer with to explain to you what's going on. And I always have that Four Non-Blondes song in my head. Hey, what's going on? Yeah, someone will always be very happy to explain to you. If they're not, if you find there is such thing as a team with a bad culture, if you find that people belittle you or they don't like your curiosity or they are passive aggressive or directly aggressive, there is such thing as a bad environment, and you do have to trust your gut. And it has happened to all of us, and it will absolutely happen to everyone at one point in their life. And unfortunately, to some people, it happens really early on in their careers, and some others never, and some others very late, so they already know to trust their gut. If you're one of them that it happens early in your career, you're kind of really unlucky because you use that as a calibration for your worth and your capabilities and your self-confidence. And it's very important that you kind of take a more holistic approach and say, okay, maybe I just don't fit into this team. And going back to what I said of have as many experiences as possible, that kind of feeds back into that nobody is universally liked, nobody is universally great, nobody is universally loved or capable in all the subjects. There's definitely luck involved, and there's definitely skill in finding rooms, companies, teams, people that you get along with. And those who are really blessed find that early on and they find their tribe. But definitely, be good at your job, ask questions, and trust your gut instinct. And if it's not good, move on to the next. Cut your losses. There's a lot of wisdom in cutting your losses.
Cool. Yeah, I think that provides quite a substantial amount of insight kind of into your pathway, into your journey, some of the things you've learned, and yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to kind of share from your experience, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I'm really happy to be contacted for whatever reason. If anyone wants some more advice from an older person who's been through a lot.
All right.
Thank you, David.